Well, hi, I'm Kendall Tyler, and welcome to our first SAP Book Club tour with Ingo Hilgefort, author of Mastering SAP Analytics Cloud, Empower Your Business Users. We will have a chat feed running so that you can ask questions during our event. The SAP Book Club was created because I wanted to find a space where SAP authors can go on a book tour and virtually have a forum where readers can ask questions and meet the authors. So each month we will select a new book, and we have some exciting books coming up. So make sure you join the SAP Book Club on LinkedIn groups to get updates. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Kendall Tyler. So I work for Genesis10 within the ERP practice. And we are a national consultancy with full project lifecycle services focusing on digital transformations to S4 HANA and legacy support, ECC. I've been in SAP for 29 years. I know, I must have been a toddler, but I have also been helping customers find the right solutions with incredible SAP talent. Genesis10 also has several other divisions with offices all over the US with creative solutions to finding IT talent. So our featured book, Mastering SAP Analytics Cloud, is about connecting to your corporate information from systems like SAP BW for HANA, SAP HANA, or SAP Business Objects. Apply data wrangling, enrich the information, and have the ability to create visually stunning stories. Our author, Ingo, has been working for SAP for the past 15 years as a product evangelist and senior director, architecting, deploying, and delivering enterprise BI-wide solutions by combining SAP Business Objects BI products with SAP landscapes for a number of worldwide customers. He's also been recognized by the SAP communities as an SAP mentor for SAP Business Objects BI and SAP landscape integration related topics for several years now. Ingo is responsible for the integration of the SAP Business Objects BI portfolio with SAP landscape, such as SAP NetWeaver, BW, or SAP Business Suite, resulting in, for example, in integrations like embedded analytics for SAP ERP 6. This is Ingo's 14th published book, and we are honored to introduce our guest, Ingo Hilgefort. Take it away, Ingo. Oh, take it off mute.
Hi, Kendall, and thanks for joining, everyone.
Hi, everybody. So I think that a lot of people want to know. So, Ingo, can you tell everyone what is exactly covered in your book?
Sure. So the main focus is SAP Analytics Cloud. So SAP is offering as a pure cloud analytics solution. So it goes from kind of like how you configure it, like first of all, how do you actually get system access, to how do you hook it up to your existing landscape or like non-SAP data sources? How can you leverage the product then basically to create like an BI solution based on top of things, as you mentioned, your HANA system, your BW system, your S4 environment. So basically really it goes from start to actually, to the end, basically building stories.
So what motivated you to create and write this book? I'm just curious, what technical books, so what motivated you to do this? 14th now, you've been at this for a while.
Exactly. It's kind of like, it's the 14th book now. So it basically started lots of years ago where actually the original like SAP Press came to me and said, well, do you want to basically, we noticed you're very active in the community. Do you want to basically put things into writing, so to speak? And there wasn't really kind of like a lot of material out there that really went from like, so to speak, start to end. I mean, you can get all the information, it's there in form of like, documentation, and these are how the features work, but it wasn't really in terms of like, this is how you would get started, and this is basically how you can go to the end, so to speak. And that was the key part, like giving a customer basically an option to look, this is how you would get started, and this is how you kind of like use the first set of features, so to speak, until like, here's some kind of like advanced kind of like, capabilities.
So how long did it so my question is like, how long did it actually take you to write the book? I mean, it's a product that's like, evolving and so forth. So how did it all happen?
It started like actually, so this is at the end as a complete book. To putting everything together, I would say it was around about 3 to 4 months of work, basically. And no, I didn't stop my day-to-day job for this. I mean, obviously not. It's not like you can actually, become rich of like, creating an SAP technical book and you can stop working. Um, it was right about 3 to 4 months work, but it was a lot of information was already like put together before, like because I had created blogs or other articles or workshops, so there was kind of like reusing that material as well, and then basically just putting in, so to speak, like a good structure so that really there's a logical kind of like steps in terms of progression in the book, right?
So will there be updates to the book? I mean, like, since it is kind of an evolving product.
Yeah, the key reason why I actually went with Amazon was really because Amazon does provide basically that capability, right? I mean, it's an ebook, so yes, I know there were a couple of customers that actually asked if they can get a printed version of it as well, but then I was like, well, if you actually get a printed version, then you're going to have to buy a new book every 3 months. So, I mean, happy to give you a book every 3 months, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense anymore. Um, so that's why I went with Amazon and actually went the Kindle route, because it is an option there to simply update the book. So you can go, you can update the book, and then all what you have to do is you have to submit, basically, so to speak, the changes to Amazon, and then simply, a few days later, any kind of customer that actually purchased the book would then get an quick email from Amazon saying, here's an update. And the good thing is you only actually purchase the book once. So as a customer, you're basically only paying once, and then you do actually get updates during the time.
That's cool. So do you have any upcoming new books? Are you writing anything about? What's new? Anything new and updating?
Well, people started asking if I want to write a book because some people have seen I basically changed over to the Data Warehouse Cloud team. So people started asking if I want to start writing a book there. I started thinking about it, but then on the other hand, the product is still relatively young. So for me as an author, the product is, in this case, it's not even a year old. It would be relatively early, so you would have to basically update pretty much every 4 weeks or every 3 weeks the book. So I think I let it mature a little bit, let's say another 6 months, and then start looking into really putting things together. Because otherwise you would have to constantly basically update the book, and there's no benefit in for everyone, right? So probably another 6 months or something when I start looking at basically in the next book in terms of potentially Data Warehouse Cloud, something like this.
Yeah, because you've spoken at several Sapphires in the past and so forth about different things, and I know that this is a hot topic for you, as and you're very within the industry. Everybody kind of looks up to you, so we're excited to know where everything's moving forward. And do you have any future predictive things about what do you predict for the future of this? Anything? If I had a crystal ball and I could say, what do you think, Ingo?
I think specifically if you look at analytics, obviously embedded is a huge topic. And we can see that with customers using S4, using embedded analytics. Obviously, everything comes, so to speak, out of the box, and the customer gets pre-configured content for us, right? And has the benefit of actually, instead of the customer building everything themselves, everything is there already for them. I think that is obviously a major step that, people will see from SAP, where the analytics solution is basically getting embedded into all the different applications, right? So things like, S4, success factors, and so on, and people already can see that. The other part clearly, is the area where I am right now. I mean, obviously, data warehousing and actually having a cloud-based data warehouse solution is obviously, something that a lot of customers asked for, and kind of like looking forward to kind of like bring that in, because it is, easier to kind of like adopt to changes than, if instead of like, you having perhaps like everything on premise. And if you need, so to speak, if you think about it, if you need more memory in your on-premise solution, you might have to physically, so to speak, still open the actual box. And if you have everything on cloud, basically it's a much easier option, right?
So do you see any industries that are more kind of like, the forefront of this compared to other industries? Or maybe there's some industries that should be doing it that have not even thought about it yet? I mean,
no, I think probably everybody sees these kind of things. If you look at, in your day-to-day life, who's kind of like leveraging, so to speak, new technology quickly, right? I mean, who would have thought, as an example, that at one point you actually have a grocery store where you don't even have a person standing at the cashier anymore, right?
yeah,
Who would have thought a few years ago that potentially at one point you get your packages delivered actually by drones, right?
yeah,
Um, I think there's certain kind of industries, if you look at it like, retail, consumer products, and so on, that are very quickly at adopting basically like new technology because it helps them, to reduce cost, right?
hmm,
And then obviously there's areas where perhaps it is a little bit slower, right? But I think there's kind of like really interesting items, if you look at kind of like, virtual reality combined with analytics, imagine you have like a technician going out and actually, you can see basically analytics combined with basically what you actually see on your camera feed or something like that, right? There's a lot of those kind of things coming up where these different technologies are basically getting combined.
yeah. Didn't they do something with the sports? Wasn't there some kind of like a sports arena kind of idea with the analytics? They were using that and trying to
Oh,
figure out
they
what the fans were thinking.
yes, they are huge already. SAP is a big item in that picture as well. Um, from if you read up probably on the website, you can actually find it. So SAP is huge with the big sports teams, either like NHL or NFL and so on. And if you look at it, not only are they able to basically, you know, monitor who had like how often touched, so to speak, the football, or who had the puck, so to speak, and the actual athlete, but it's also they basically able to monitor what happens basically on, so to speak, game day at the arena, right?
Yeah.
Um, how many hot dogs did we sell, or how many parking slots are open, and where do we need to actually bring people? It's a lot of kind of like uh, those kind of things where people use new technology basically, to then create a very compelling experience for the customer at the end, right?
Yeah, I love the people that think outside the box. I mean, I think that's kind of what this is all about is like you think outside the box. What could you do as a company to, improve, or what could you do to create a new industry line or a revenue stream into your company? And just by using this tool, you could do that. I mean, if you start looking at the analytics of it all, but how do it's all about thinking what's the next step, really, kind of. So let's take some discussion. Anybody got some good questions for Ingo? I've kind of run out of questions at the moment, so let's see on the chat board. Anybody have something? Oh, Ingo lives in Canada, by the way. That's why he
Sorry?
talks to me. He lives in Canada. But he's German. Isn't that right, Ingo?
Yes, I'm originally German, so we can start speak German and then surprise everyone.
Don't do that. I speak Southern. I don't. That's all I know.
So I see a question in the chat. It's basically, so where is Analytics Cloud sitting in the overall BI market? Um, So let me paraphrase that a little bit, depending on, probably what people have seen. I'm sure some people might have seen just recently as an example, that obviously, there's the Gartner Magic Quadrant and kind of like, I'm pretty sure everybody has seen that obviously Power BI is kind of like in the top right corner, so to speak. And yes, if you've been in the BI market for a few years, I'm pretty sure you've seen Microsoft, the Power BI solution, you've seen Tableau, you might have seen MicroStrategy, you might have seen Click. So just to give like, a few kind of like of the competition. I think the big differentiation between kind of like what SAC does and actually what some of the other vendors are doing is, first of all, SAC is a complete solution, not just for analytics. So there is basically the planning portion, specifically if you're coming from an SAP background, there's the planning part in there, which actually separates SAC from any of the other companies because none of the other BI solutions has planning actually integrated in their product. So if you, for example, would go to Tableau and you need planning, that means you need to buy a second product. So you're ending up with basically Tableau for your dashboarding and, for example, Anaplan for your planning solution. That's where actually SAC comes in with one solution. The other part is obviously the integration into the SAP products. So if you're an SAP shop and let's say you have S4, then SAC is part of the embedded analytics story. If you basically have BW or if you have like HANA, SAC integrates with those landscapes out of the box where basically all the other products rely on, so to speak, third-party interfaces, which might not actually give you the rich metadata that you have in the systems, right? So there's another question. Let me just quickly read. How do you see the position? So there's another question around basically SAC compared with Power BI. Um, well, yeah. So I think there's basically a little bit of like misperception in here as well. So, and I think that's the important part. So Power BI is always seen as free, right? And it is actually, seen as free from people because they actually perceive it as being part of Office 365. Yes, it is in there with the desktop version, but if you then really want to use Power BI on a corporate level, you're still going to have to purchase actually the server components. So even though, so to speak, the desktop version is free, if you really want to use Power BI, for example, with let's say 1,000 users, you're going to have to purchase the server. You have to buy the actual, so to speak, the cloud version with the gateways and everything. So it isn't free. That's one of the items that obviously kind of like, is a perception there. So there is a question then, can we integrate web intelligence documents into SAC? So yes, you can. So there is an option, and I'm actually explaining it how you're setting it up in the book. It's basically an option to what we call do a hybrid deployment, where you have Analytics Cloud running in the cloud, and then you have your Business Objects system on premise. So when you configure it, the options you can use is you can use the universe as a data source for your analytics, or you can use an existing web intelligence document that is part of the latest version. So you need to be on release 4.3. Otherwise, that wasn't available yet. So the benefit of using the web intelligence document is that in case you have any calculations or any formulas that you have specifically for that report. The other part, the analysis office documents, you cannot use those, but actually Analytics Cloud integrates with Analysis Office, or there's a version called the Analytics Cloud add-in to Microsoft Office. So where you actually leverage your data sources and your data models inside the Office environment. So now there's the next question: is Data Warehouse Cloud the next iteration of BW? And will there be content to take advantage of? So let me start with the second part. Yes, business content is a very critical part, right? I mean, people that have been long enough in the SAP market know that, for example, one of the big success criteria of BW was because it had a lot of business content out of the box. So that, for example, if you're a finance, you didn't have to worry about how to extract the data for your financial closure into BW because SAP actually pre-built that for you. You can customize it, but you don't have to start from scratch. It gives you like a huge head start. For Data Warehouse Cloud, that's exactly the same thing. We already have business content for Data Warehouse Cloud, and we basically each quarter we deliver new packages that you can simply try out. I think one of the differences between Data Warehouse Cloud and BW, specifically on the business content side, is that with Data Warehouse Cloud, you can simply try it out. It comes with sample data. You don't have to necessarily, for all of the content, hook up your S4 system or hook up your ERP system to actually see what the content could be doing for you. You can actually just give it a try. And then you can decide, okay, now I'm going to integrate it and I'll hook up all my source data, but you see the content already. Now, to come to the question, is Data Warehouse Cloud basically the next iteration of BW? If you look at the strategy, you will clearly see that Data Warehouse Cloud is complementary to BW. It is not there to replace BW, right? And if you think about it, Data Warehouse Cloud is not even a year old. BW is a product that's like 20 years old. I think just based on that, we can all agree that like a 12 months old product is not going to be able to replace like a 20-year-old mature like enterprise data warehouse system, right? That would take a few years until it is at that level. It's the same kind of question that we received like, several years ago where like the question was like, is HANA going to replace BW? And we always try to say no, and we're still saying no, and it still hasn't replaced the one. So Data Warehouse Cloud is basically positioned as a complementary solution to give you more flexibility and actually address a different kind of like persona. You see. Next question. Where are we? Okay, SEC planning is not a different product as far as I know. It requires a separate license. Yes, so you're absolutely correct. That's the big benefit, right? As I mentioned in Analytics Cloud, planning is integrated into the product. It's not a separate product. It is just a different license. And that's the big advantage. In the same way, you have Smart Predict, for example, as part of when we say Analytics Cloud. Is all in one product. And quite honestly, if you're basically, when I talk to customers and you're telling a typical BI person, well, your BI tool actually has planning capabilities, it's kind of like, so what? Right? They're not really getting excited. But if you're telling the person who does the planning part, hey, there's analytics and there's predictive, actually, it comes out of the box, it's like, ooh, that's getting interesting because I can run my forecast based on the system, and then I can actually, for example, compare my planning numbers with what the system would forecast based on our history, right? So now you'll actually start to getting into those kind of scenarios. And if you look at our planning portion, and if you see kind of like the scenarios and use cases, there's a lot of that where they basically start talking about kind of like predictive planning and so on, where basically you do run the predictive scenarios and then you're comparing it actually with your planning numbers. So then there's a question, can you talk about how SAC fits into the landscape? And then there's a bunch of words, sorry if I say that. So data intelligence, data hub, SAC. Yes, so I don't have like a whiteboard, otherwise I would start drawing right now. So first of all, let me clarify, data intelligence and data hub is basically, a different word for the same thing. So if you go back in history, there was basically data hub and, it's basically data intelligence, so to speak. The products actually came together. So data intelligence is basically the product that gives you the ability to like orchestrate your pipelines. So I oversimplify now, and please don't take this the wrong way, but data intelligence is your ETL. It's one of the options, right? Obviously, ETL, as I said, oversimplifies what data intelligence is capable of. But it's just basically the tool that actually allows you to orchestrate your pipelines. So if we're going basically bottom up, you got data intelligence doing your pipelines, your data loading, your data ingestions, potentially federation, you go into data warehouse cloud. So data intelligence is actually integrated into data warehouse cloud. For those who've seen data warehouse cloud, there's a feature called a data flow. Now that is actually an embedded version of data intelligence. And then on top, you basically have your analytics cloud for all your analytics stories. So I hope that kind of like helps. So then there's a question, what do you think about the digital boardroom? Um, the digital boardroom is a very interesting experience. For those who have not kind of like seen or heard about it, a digital boardroom is basically, again, analytics cloud as an analytics cloud, for your stories. But then you actually have the ability to combine it with kind of like the experience of the large, so to speak, smart TVs and touch experience on TVs. But the key part is you have the ability to bring in parts of your analytics content from different areas and combine it. So think about, you have a story where you have your financial numbers. How are we doing this month? How is our forecast looking? How did we last month? How is our run rate? A bunch of financial numbers. We might have content where we actually see kind of like perhaps how our competition is doing. Perhaps we bought some industry content, things like Dun and Bradstreet. How are we, for example, comparing to other peers in the same industry sector? And then perhaps, as a third portion, there might be, items related to, expenses, travel, employees, meetings, and so on. Now, the digital boardroom is giving you that ability to bring all these different informations together and actually then present it basically back, so to speak, to your management. And then on top, you have that experience, obviously with the big TVs and so on, the touch experience. So, yeah, we do have lots of customers that actually really use that. And it's kind of like, what I would say, being part of like really becoming data driven. So it's not just kind of like software and hardware. It's also, there needs to be the mentality basically in the company to actually have that board meeting where here's the numbers and we're actually looking at the numbers like live, right? So then there's the question, is SAP delivered standard business content available? Yes, so we do have content available for data warehouse cloud. There's content for analytics cloud. It's as simple as basically going into, for example, SAP Analytics Cloud, and you will see there is an item called content network, and the content network comes with samples that you can use to learn the product, that also we use from an SAP point of view to create sometimes, scenarios and exercises so that you can actually follow it at home. And then obviously there's the actual real business content. So like, finance and sales and procurement that you can implement on top of your basically version. So then there's the next question. In terms of performance, we're here and seeing slowness for using SEC with BW, okay, so I think this is also one of those topics, it's around performance and then competition. What we see is actually, and again, I don't want to kind of like sound kind of like bad here, but it's kind of like we need to make sure we're comparing basically apples with apples and oranges with oranges. So what we've seen a lot of customers actually compares that when they use Analytics Cloud live on top of BW, and then they're comparing it with, for example, Power BI, but forget that actually Power BI extracted the data out of BW. So that's what I mean. If we're basically looking at that, that means we're not comparing oranges with oranges. We're basically comparing a system that actually connects life to your SAP landscapes, which gives you the guarantee that the data doesn't leave your network, right? We have the capability to connect to your S4 system, to your BW system live, and it doesn't leave your network. It's a security question. Now, if you take Power BI, it actually extracts the data, which also means your data security is out of the window because the data is not in BW anymore, for example, and any authorizations that you defined in BW is actually not working anymore because the data isn't in BW. So now we're comparing basically, think about as if you're basically talking live to your BW system, or if you actually take the data into a spreadsheet and you open up the spreadsheet on your local desktop, right? So that's where very often those kind of like comparisons come from. So there's a question now, which SEC capabilities are we able to create a Lumira dashboard or a Webby standard report? Very good question. So in Lumira, Lumira had two basically products. There was Lumira basically as a desktop tool, and then there is Lumira Designer. So for Lumira Designer, we do have in the cloud basically now the analytics application design. So again, it's Analytics Cloud, but it's just a different, so to speak, environment to actually create your, in this case, analytical applications. For building the dashboards, that's what in Analytics Cloud we would call stories. So you can go in, you can set up your connections, you build the stories, and you can basically achieve what you were doing in Lumira dashboards as well with Lumira Designer. The Web Intelligence, the standard reports were basically, if you look at our roadmap, we are starting to actually add that kind of capability this year. So if you look at the roadmap in Analytics Cloud, we're actually calling it enterprise reporting. So the ability to actually design a report with like repeated headers, repeated layout, more driven, similar like a page that in case if you export it to a PDF file, it looks basically like what you had on screen and so on. More these kind of like repeatable sections, similar what Web Intelligence does. That is basically being added this year, and there will be more and more these kind of capabilities added into Analytics Cloud. So that is a question like, what's the prerequisite to kind of like learn SAP Analytics Cloud? I mean, obviously, I could easily say now buy my book and you can start learning it. I think basically one of the items a lot of people forget. So Analytics Cloud is an analytics product, and analytics is something that if you think about, there's basically certain ways how we as humans, so to speak, perceive numbers, right? And if you basically, you're starting from scratch and you start learning analytics, I can only highly recommend to also start looking at actually technology independent material. What I mean by that is, if you, for example, Google a guy called Stephen Fu, if you Google a guy called Andy Kirk, these are people that have focused on how we as humans actually consume data. And they will give you a lot of tips. As an example, colors don't help, like three-dimensional charts, waste of time, right? They will tell you actually this is how you should visualize actually numbers. This is how we perceive data. And I think that's an important part to think about as well. There's on the one hand, just simply learning the product. And then there's on the other hand, understanding how we basically as humans actually perceive data and how we actually consume it. There's a lot of like, so to speak, science behind it. There's a question now. Business Objects is basically support is going until 2027 with SAP and Business Objects as options. This creates confusion, and SAP is not putting the BI direction strongly for clients and changes frequently. I would actually disagree with that. Obviously, analytics is a huge strategic importance for SAP, and we have been very clearly communicating, and it actually has been updated recently. If you Google it, we have a statement of direction. And yes, Business Objects is still supported for the next couple of years. There's nothing wrong with that. And as I said, the reason is also because we are bringing the capabilities that, for example, a typical web intelligence customer would need to move to the cloud into SAP Analytics Cloud, right? So, for example, the enterprise reporting. The other part, if you use business objects, you will see that, you have a lot of customers using the universes. Now, if you look at Data Warehouse Cloud, there's what we call the business layer. The business layer is basically the counterpart to what on the business object side your universe is. Is it able to die to replace the universe? No, because it's not even a year old, right? We just started. But it shows you that we are actually looking at an option to basically bring you into the cloud as a business objects customer and offer you basically options that you can leverage to actually move to the cloud. And clearly it is a very strategic item. Just kind of like scrolling down. So now there's a question: do the embedded SAC editions have the same features as the baseline? That depends on which version we're talking about and when it was created, because it also it says Cloud Foundry in the bracket. So we do have basically, let's pick the biggest differentiation. So if we're talking S4 embedded, or if we're talking SuccessFactors embedded, so first of all, sorry, the embedded versions are really designed to be fully embedded with the application. One of the items you will notice is that you also don't have to create users in the system because it comes embedded with the actual application. So if you would basically have your own SAC, system, then you would also have to make sure that you're actually bringing in the users and you're setting everything up, which in the embedded version, you don't. The embedded version also very often is then limited to basically the application in terms of data sources. So, you might not be able, because it comes as part of, let's say, SuccessFactors or S4, you might not be able to bring in, let's say, suddenly your BW data as well. So where actually then the upsell would be the full version of SAC. There's a question now back on Digital Boardroom. So yes, Digital Boardroom does require a separate license. Do I think if it's going to be part of SAP Analytics license? Well, even if I would know, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be allowed to tell everyone, right? And let me phrase it in that way, because you're saying it should be free. Sure, I'm pretty sure that a lot of customers would agree with you that certain things should be free. But then on the other hand, kind of like, please don't take this the wrong way. At the end, we also want to make a living, right? So, it does it become at one point part of the license? I don't know. I mean, and even if I would know, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be allowed to say. So then I saw an impressive digital boardroom in person at Honda too, man. Everything is virtual. It's something. Yeah, so I would agree. The digital boardroom is something, if you actually see it like physically in front of it, it's quite an impressive experience. I remember like the last Sapphire that was there physically, we actually had, I'm not sure if anyone has seen that. LG has these see-through TVs that you can hang on your wall, and actually you see your wall, you don't see a TV. We had basically one of those on the show floor, where basically you could actually stand on both sides, so to speak, and actually see your analytics dashboard right in front of there. So it is quite an impressive experience, because you can actually move the analytics around, you can interact with the charts, you can interact with the maps and so on. So it's quite an interesting experience there. So then, yeah, Tammy posted the latest statement of direction. So then question, does SAC work well with S4 and BW on HANA versions? Um, that depends on what well in this case means. So let's start with BW. Obviously, if you look at SAP, if you look at BW, there's BW 4, 1 and 2. Then you got BW 7.5, you got BW 7.4, you got BW 7.3, BW on HANA, then there's BW on SQL Server, and so on. And I think we can all agree that it's to some degree understandable that we can't support all versions equally, because then we wouldn't get out of this, never, right? We would have to basically take every single feature and make it work on kind of like 10, 20 different versions of BW, and then we would start talking ERP. And perhaps there's even customers that still run R3 4.7. I mean, obviously it's not scalable, that model. So SAP follows a very simple logic. It's current minus one. So if we take the SAC example, that means we support basically the current minus one versions, for example, of BW. Those are the major versions. Now, current minus one means BW for HANA, minus one means BW 7.5. So you will notice that, for example, if you're on BW 7.3, for example, there is no live connectivity. It would only be an option for you to import the data into Analytics Cloud, but there's no live connectivity. Live connectivity then is only supported with BW4 and BW 7.5. And you will also notice that some features might not work if you're on an older version. So that really is a question, go into the platform, so to speak, the platform matrix. We show clearly which version is the minimum that we need, either for acquiring the data or a live connection. But it could also very well be that certain kind of features don't actually work if you on an older version. Let's go down. So then there's a question, what about scheduling feature? Comparing scheduling and in SAC needs to be added. Yes, you're absolutely right. The scheduling feature, again, it's basically, I would say it's not even a year old. It probably has been added somewhere around the last 12 months. Does it completely replace what the business object scheduling is capable of doing today? No. Business Objects has been around for 15 years now, and the scheduling and the broadcasting and so on is very mature. And on the SAC side, we just added the scheduling recently. But it also keep in mind, and that's one of the items customers need to keep in mind, specifically if we're looking at, for example, Business Objects and Analytics Cloud. Are we going to implement every single feature by feature, what exists in Business Objects into the Analytics Cloud product? Probably not, because things have changed, things have moved on. That doesn't mean that your use case is not being considered, but there might be a different way to get to the same result. Right? So as an example, if you look at actually the scheduling portion, one of the items in Analytics Cloud we already offer is actually scheduling based on bookmarks, where you as a person, for example, you created a bookmark with your actually preferred filters or your preferred filters for the team, and you can use that for scheduling. Now, that didn't even exist on the business object side. So that's what I mean. Like, there will be features that are completely new in Analytics Cloud that you didn't have before. There might also be features that are actually implemented to do a very similar use case, and where the exact same features would not be implemented in the new product, right? Because if we would every single time do every single feature that we ever had, we wouldn't kind of like be able to kind of like bring any kind of innovation. So then there's a question, what are some of the add-ons that customers should consider? So right now, it's a good question. We do have basically partners that actually deliver add-on solutions. So there are add-on solutions from a visualization point of view, which are mainly targeting the analytics designer. And then there is basically add-on solutions specifically around connectivity. So, for example, some of you might have heard, specifically if we're talking North America, there's a partner of SAP called APOS. It's been around for a long, long time on the Business Objects side. They have, for example, also data connectivity for Analytics Cloud to close basically the gap. And we've always been doing that. I mean, there's so many data sources out there that we can't basically, build everything, and that's why there are partners that are creating the add-on solutions. With Data Warehouse Cloud, we're doing the same thing. We have several partners. For example, there's a partner called SnapLogic in the US that actually delivers data sources for Data Warehouse Cloud. Perhaps you need a very specific API, it's a very specific source system that if we look at it from an SAP point of view, we would say, look, you're the first customer that asked, perhaps, not important for us. But the partner says, hey, this works out for me. I can actually do this. So that's why these partners are there. So there's another question: is SAC support dynamic currency quantity conversion? Yes, we do. So Analytics Cloud does support currency conversion. You have two options. Option number one is you do the currency conversion in SAP Analytics Cloud. That means you define the currency, you define the conversion rates, you define if you want to convert like on a daily basis or on a monthly average, but then you have to do everything inside of SAP Analytics Cloud. The option is if you already have BW, then we simply actually give you the currency conversion that actually is possible in BW. So you don't have to do anything. You will see that if you're in Analytics Cloud and it is a BW query, you will see there is an item called currency conversion, and it retrieves actually what you configured in BW, and you can do it in the same way as if you would, for example, do in Analysis Office. So now there's a question: is it true that if we need a reporting tool on premise, we need to look for web intelligence? But if we go into the cloud, then Analytics Cloud is the choice. And yeah, I mean, Business Objects is on premise and Analytics Cloud is your cloud solution. So there's no plan to make Analytics Cloud an on-premise solution because clearly our customers are moving into the cloud, right? And if you still like you starting from scratch to die and you still looking for an on-premise solution, that would be in this case Business Objects, yes. But I would then also have a lot of questions, so to speak, like why are you looking still for like a pure on-premise solution? What's the reasoning behind it? Because there might be reasons behind it where it still could become a cloud solution at the end that fulfills that requirement, right? So then there's a question: how effectual is SAC as a self-service tool? Well, we have like thousands of customers. We have like lots of users on the system, and self-service is one of those topics that has been around for years. And then, before kind of like giving a very generic answer, but it's like everybody might have a different definition of what actually self-service means, right? As an example, for some people, self-service means that actually all I need is a table and I want to be able to slice and dice the table and I'm good with that. For some people, self-service means I need to build a complete brand new dashboard. So the capabilities are there. So you can actually give people the complete freedom to start from scratch and build a new dashboard. You can also actually create a dashboard where your end user is basically able to, so to speak, like pivot the table, change the dimension, change the filters, and so on, choose the measure, but they cannot change, let's say, the structure of the dashboard. And they might be able to change the chart type, but they cannot change, let's say, where the chart sits in the dashboard. So the capabilities are there. It really depends on, so to speak, what you're making out of it and how you would define, so to speak, self-service in that case. So then there's a question: am I covering any of the advanced capabilities? So such as like AI and ML. So let me clarify. So when we're talking SAP Analytics Cloud, we're talking AI and ML. That means basically what we call in our case augmented BI. So in Analytics Cloud, we have features such as like Smart Insight and Smart Discovery that use ML technologies, but it's not like that you are coding against it, right? Analytics Cloud is a business user tool. So it basically covers how the product is using it and how you can use these capabilities. But in this case, we're not talking about like, AI and ML in the context of like, for example, you writing a Python script or something like that. Will SAC have crystal reports features? So, well, my simple answer is no. And the reason why I'm saying that is Crystal Reports is a product that has been around since the 90s, and we have lots of customers and lots of happy users. And it's such a unique, basically, requirement, so to speak, like a pixel perfect report, where I don't think that we're going to plan to kind of like put that into the cloud in that up to the same level as Crystal Reports. Are we going to offer you enterprise reporting and like some capability of formatted reporting closer to what Web Intelligence does? Yes, but right now it's not the plan that SAP Analytics Cloud is going to replace like Crystal Reports. So now there's a question, importing data from S4, what is the better way? CDS views or calculation view? Simple answer, CDS views is the preferred option and kind of like the way to go. If you look at business content for S4, it actually, if you can see that, you will always notice that in most cases it leveraged the CDS views. Can we use S4 HANA directly in SAC? That depends on what you're doing. Most of the items are really embedded scenarios where, depending on what it is, you have to use the embedded version of SAC. Now there's a question, can you please throw some light on integrating accessing Fiori basic analytic queries with SAC? I'm not 100% sure what you're referring to with like analytic queries. I mean, Fiori is basically when someone brings up Fiori versus SAC, to me, that's like, writing code versus using a product that was designed to do a certain scenario, right? Can you basically, for example, integrate SAC into your Fiori app? Yes, you can. Could you create a chart and a nice dashboard with Fiori? Sure, you can, but it means basically writing code versus kind of like, SAC is a product that was designed to actually really build the dashboard. And I think we're pretty much nearly at the end of the time.
We
So let me just
are.
last
They
question.
just keep
So,
asking questions again. All right, one more question,
so
and then we'll wrap
yeah.
it.
So voice to search would consider AMLL. Haven't tried. I wouldn't consider voice to search AIML. That's more, if you look at it, it's more like the NLP kind of like area of all these like like fancy abbreviations. But yeah, definitely it's a nice feature to try out that we just added recently, where you can actually talk, so to speak, to your phone, and it turns out into a search in SAC.
Excellent. Well, goodness, everybody, if you have any other questions, you can always pick up his book. So, but I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. We have 5, and we've had some great questions and great topics. And I also want to let you know about our next featured book is Certification Guide for SAP SAP TS 410 Integrated Business Processes in SAP S/4HANA by Robert Schleminski. And please join the SAP Book Club group on LinkedIn and join us each month. We look forward to meeting and working with everyone in the future. And remember to enjoy picking up a book again and learning about the world of SAP. Thank you, Ingo. Thank you, everybody, and cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.